Hey, it's Luca, and welcome to the Luca Savazzi podcast. A lot of people slowly disconnect from themselves without even realizing it. And maybe you're one of them. Somewhere along the way, you've learned that you were just too much, too unrealistic, too weird, too emotional, too creative, too risky, or simply just not practical enough. So instead of accepting who we are, we adapt and we become who we think we're supposed to be. Until one day we look back at our lives and we think, what do I actually want? What lights me up? What part of me have I been ignoring? Maybe you are someone with a lot of ideas, creative. You have dreams, you're curious, you have ambitions that never really disappeared. They just got buried underneath expectations, fear, survival, or the pressure to fit in. If your life now looks good on the outside, but on the inside something feels off, like you've drifted from yourself, maybe the bigger question is, how many of the choices you're making today are actually yours? So if this sounds like you, don't go anywhere, because today's conversation is all about the beliefs that shape our choices, the identities that we've become attached to, and what happens when we finally give ourselves permission to question our beliefs and stop hiding who we are and go for what we want. Today's guest is Maggie Harlow. She's a very successful entrepreneur and a trusted advisor to business people on multiple continents. She has built multi-million-dollar companies, led high-performing teams in various industries, and she's been highlighted, awarded, and featured in many national media outlets. She's committing to helping high achievers like you and me discover a different kind of victory. She knows that many of us already reached impressive milestones, yet we hunger for something more, a sense of alignment, fulfillment, and true peace. She's also the author of the book Everyday Extraordinary: How Giving Yourself Permission Changes Everything. Through her work and her book, she teaches how giving yourself permission can unlock a new level of freedom, self-direction, and self-trust. Permission to express yourself, permission to create, permission to want something different. And maybe, most importantly, permission to fully be yourself. Please help me welcome to the Luca Savazzi podcast, Maggie Harlow. Hey, Maggie.
Oh, Luca, I'm so glad to be here. It took a minute, but I figured it out. We got it dialed in.
I'm excited about this conversation also because we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. And every time we've been talking, it feels like it should have been its own episode. We should have recorded it.
We should have recorded everything.
So what becomes possible if we stop waiting for permission and we start questioning those beliefs that, are running our lives?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Luca. I'm glad you asked. Yes, I believe that permission is the doorway that all of us can open. I think so often in life we think we have to qualify, we have to prove something, we have to have some certification, some approval, even an expectation that other people may have to let us do the things we want to do in life. And what I was raised in a family that believed that permission is self-granted, that if there's something you want to do, if there's something you want to try, it's really up to you to decide what rules you're going to follow. And it all came from my grandfather who repeatedly said, rules are for the fools who need them. And he really
Yeah.
believed that you make your life, you make your choices, and no one can decide those things for you.
So has there been a point where this was different for you?
Yeah, I grew up in a family that, like I said, that was really okay with, they never really told me what I should or shouldn't do. That really was not what, they didn't give that kind of guidance. And so when I graduated from high school and was going to go to college, I didn't know what to I didn't have a sense of what I wanted to study. It was not a conversation my family would have, would be to say, Well, you should do this, or you should study this, or you should find a good job. They really were like, well, what do you want to study? And so I ended up studying oil painting.
Okay.
And so I studied art, and it was a wonderful education. I had a great time in college, and I'm still an artist. Um, but I called it my degree in unemployment.
How
And
so?
so I went to work for the family business because I didn't have any other plan. And I kind of just went through life floating along like a raft in a river, just floating along. And I finally, at age 35, I finally felt like I woke up. I was married. I had 2 kids. We were both working great jobs. But I just had this epiphany that while I was happy in my life, I was not really doing something that excited me every day, that
Hmm.
I was happy to be doing. And that's when I decided I needed to start paddling and not just so much floating. I needed to start giving myself permission to choose the direction of my life. And that's when we quit our jobs and started a business. And then I became addicted to this idea of my own self-reliance, my own ability to make choices. And it's sort of like I woke up. I felt like I woke up. And since then, I'm now 57. I've done a lot of things that I gave myself permission to do. I wrote a book, which I never planned to write a book. I'm back to making art, which I never knew would be something I would do. And I am giving myself the ability to listen to that inner child and what she wants. And that's changed my life. I think as children, we're good at giving ourselves the freedom to play games or do the things we want or enjoy the things we want to enjoy. But I think as adults, these thoughts creep in as you move into adulthood of what you should do, what the expectations are, what's normal, are you fitting in? And I think that those kinds of invisible barriers can shape our behavior and convince us to do things or not do things that we
Hmm.
we really we really want to be doing with our lives. And so I've discovered that through the way my family raised me, through the culture of our family, we have a very permissive culture of make yourself happy. You get one chance in life, and it's easy to talk yourself out of the things you really want. And so I try to encourage, especially busy, successful people who are stressed and trying to do everything right and perfectly. And I like to help folks get back in touch with who they are, and give themselves permission to make the choices that really resonate with them.
How do you know what is actually right if you have all this permission, like you've been raised having permission to discover your own path?
Mhm.
How do you know what is your path?
Oh, you make mistakes.
Right.
You try and you fail, or you make a choice and you realize this doesn't quite fit right for me. Um, I think that I have learned that when something doesn't quite feel aligned, when I tune in to really who I am, I notice that you can start noticing sooner and sooner. So, for example, um, one of the stories I tell is that I was ironing my husband's shirt. He asked me to iron his shirt before we went out. It's a very normal thing. It's a very typical marital sort of helper type of thing.
Hmm.
But that particular night, I suddenly was gripped with this feeling of, I don't want to iron ever again. I never want to iron again. And
I know that feeling.
yes, you're just like, I really hate this. I really hate this. And so I decided that was it. And I offered my iron to my husband if he wanted it. And he said no, he would take his shirts to the dry cleaner. And it's a small thing, but it was such a moment of like, oh, I can make choices. I don't have to do things because I think I'm obligated or I think I'm expected to, or society would tell me that if I'm a good person, I would do that thing. And so I think it reflects in my life in small choices, but it also reflects in big choices where I spend my time professionally pursuing things that really are fun and exciting to me, that really resonate with me, and not just, trying to meet everyone else's expectations. So, in
Right.
small ways and in big ways, we often are guided by these invisible ideas, the beliefs that underpin our choices. But you can question those beliefs and you
Mm-hmm.
can find out, is this truly what I believe? So for me, questioning the thought, well, if I'm a good wife, I'll iron my husband's shirt. And when I questioned that, I realized I can still be a good wife and not iron his shirt. It's okay. They can both be true.
Why do you think it gets harder when you know, get older, you get more beliefs? Why don't we question those beliefs like earlier?
I think that we start to create an identity. When you create an identity like I'm a successful business owner, or I'm an athletic person, or I'm really kind and generous. We create these identities in our life, and then we feel bound to them. And when we start to really identify the beliefs that we want to hold and the beliefs we want to give up, that's when you start to give yourself permission. But
Hmm.
our identity, for example, if I am someone who likes to be really fit and I like to see myself as like very athletic and very strong, it might be difficult for me to make a choice that doesn't reflect that identity. And so those are invisible ways that our identity controls us. And I think that I want to invite everyone to create an identity that is flexible, that lets them make a different choice. So if I'm a successful business owner and I feel like every year I have to make more money and I have to build my business and I have to be the most successful and I have to be compared to other businesses, suddenly that's making choices for me that maybe I don't really want. Maybe I don't really want to work that hard, but I've fallen into this identity and I'm stuck with it. But you're
Yeah.
not. You can change your identity.
Changing your identity means, changing the way people see you,
Mhm.
or people have to deal with you changing. That can be scary. What would be a way to start that change?
I think that if there's something you've decided you're ready to do, so let's say that you've always been a volunteer for a soup kitchen, right? You've always
Mm,
been the person who shows up every weekend to work at a soup kitchen. And maybe you're ready to let it go. Maybe you're ready to take your weekend back and sleep in on that day. And it can feel like there's a lot of pressure and expectation that people are expecting you. They reward you with praise. They give you attention. They give you good feelings. They say you're a good person for doing this, and that somehow stepping away from it feels like a betrayal. I would invite you to question those beliefs. So write down that powerful belief that maybe has a grip on you. That belief of uh, people expect me to show up to this soup kitchen, and if I don't, I'm being selfish. And then you can start questioning that. Is that true? Is it really true? Would people who love me really want me to show up if I don't want to show up? There's a
mhm.
way to separate yourself from your beliefs. Sometimes our beliefs are hidden and they kind of just make us operate like a puppet. But when you start really writing down your beliefs and what's holding you back, you can question that and loosen the grip of that belief. You can still be a good person and decide you don't want to work in a soup kitchen. Again, both can be true, but we forget and we want to meet the expectation and the identity that we think other people have of us.
But when does giving yourself permission cross that boundary where your permission overlaps with someone else's boundary?
I think you have to learn to be uncomfortable at that line. That um, sometimes we get uncomfortable giving ourselves permission because we think that that overlap is a betrayal of some kind. So, for example, if I go to the manager of the soup kitchen and I say, "Look, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore," and they say, "Well, that's a huge problem for us because we've built this around you. We've designed this around you being here. Now, what are we going to do?" I can decide whose responsibility that is. If I want responsibility and say, I'm gonna keep working in the soup kitchen and I'm gonna recruit someone to help, I can take that responsibility on, but sometimes that responsibility is an option. Just because someone has created something that has me at the center of it, that doesn't necessarily make it my responsibility. Have I signed a contract? Did we agree that this was gonna be my responsibility? I think we often take responsibility because we don't wanna disappoint or we don't want
Mm,
other people to have a reaction. And I've learned that, um, if that soup kitchen manager is disappointed, that's his right or that's her right. She can have those feelings about me. And that doesn't necessarily mean that because she has a feeling or a perception of me that that's true or real. She's
yeah.
allowed to think that. She's allowed to think I'm selfish, and I can still do what I choose. And I think that that's hard for some people because we wanna maintain our identity. I am a good person, and I need her to agree that I'm a good person, but you don't actually need the agreement. It's really entirely up to you.
Now we're talking about the soup kitchen, but also in a family situation where people are used to you having a particular role in the family, and you realize that you have to set boundaries maybe or say no and protect your health, balance it out.
Yes, in personal relationships, in work relationships, in friendships, I think that we often show up because we're trying to maintain our identity. We want people to perceive us in a certain way, which in a way, Luca, is a control tactic. Like, it's a way for me to try to control what other people feel, and that's not really my job. It's not my
Mm,
job to control what other people feel about me or how they might react. They're entitled to feel what they feel. They're entitled to react and have their beliefs about me, but that's separate than who I am. I love a saying by Byron Katie. She's one of the women who I study, and she's guided me, and a lot of what I work on is based on what she has her thought leadership around belief. And one of the things she says that I love is, "What people think of me is none of my business." It's an easy thing
true.
to say, but it's a hard thing to actually live through.
Often it also looks like it has to be this big thing, right? Permission to quit your job, permission to do something else, to do a new relationship, whatever. But it's in the small things.
Yes. Sometimes it's small choices. It doesn't have to be life-changing. It could be, as simple as, I don't wanna iron my husband's shirt, or
Hmm.
I don't wanna be the person at work who's always, cleaning out the coffee pot. I want someone else to do it. We sometimes fall into these habits and choices, and maybe we like them at first, and then we decide we don't like them anymore. I don't wanna be the person who is responsible for walking the dog every day. I need someone else to step up and start doing it. There can be small choices that we make that feel like they're obligations, like we can't not do this. But in reality, if you sit and really sit with your beliefs and write them down, separate yourself a little bit from the belief, you might be able to find a path to, I don't have to be the person who always walks the dog. I can ask other people for help, and or even pay someone to walk the dog. I could hire someone to walk the dog. But we get stuck in a pattern, and these little things can help you learn how to do bigger things. I find that it becomes addictive, that when you start to learn you are completely in control of your choices, that suddenly you're able to make more and more choices that align with who you are.
You have this fun analogy where you speak about flushing the turd. Okay, tell us a bit about that.
So years ago, I saw a football coach speak, and he was telling a story about as a football coach, the most important thing he teaches his players is not how to tackle, is not how to run the ball. The most important thing he taught them was how to flush the turd. And what he meant by that is that you're going to make mistakes on the field. You're going to miss the catch. You're going to fumble the ball. You're going to miss the kick. You might cost the team the game. You might really mess up really badly. But the more important thing is to focus on flushing that turd. So it's a terrible, gross analogy, but it's so vivid, right? So if you make a turd, don't stand there and stare at it. Don't invite people in to look at it. Just flush it. Save the lesson, learn the lesson, but at the end of the day, nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Let it go and clear your mind and be ready for your next move and clear yourself of that turd. So my friends and I use this phrase sometimes when we're talking, maybe we're having drinks and we're talking about a problem at work. Something bad happened. Someone said something rude. Your boss, did something awful to you, and we like to talk about it, and it's like this turd that we want to all commiserate about how bad it is. And always at some point in the conversation someone says it's time to flush the turd,
Yeah.
and we're going to be done talking about negative things and we're going to talk about other things. So it's okay to vent, but sometimes I know some people love to they just want to hold on to it, and I just encourage people to like flush it, let it go.
If you compare it to that, a turd, then I think a lot of people would want to flush it and not hold on to it. So, to create the life you want and giving yourself permission also requires taking decisions.
Yeah, I think that decision making is a really important topic because everybody does it differently. Everybody weighs decisions in different ways. I am a very gut oriented decision maker. If I feel like a decision is clear for me and I'm drawn to it, I I will make that decision. I will go toward it. And often I make a lot of mistakes, and that means I have to unwind and fix something. Some people get stuck in decisions, and they wanna make the right decision,
Mm.
and they gather information, and they gather information, and they talk to people, and they weigh it, and they're waiting, I think, for that, like, green light. They're waiting for that perfect clarity, or to be perfectly prepared, to know all the possible bad things that could happen. And they spend all this time in their head trying to make a decision and gathering information, when in reality, it's more important in most situations to make the decision and then work to make that decision the right decision. So if I am I don't think there's ever really a right decision. Now, people like to say that, well, that was the right decision. I We
Hmm.
don't know, because if a decision got made, you never know the opposite decision and how that would have
True.
turned out.
Yeah.
So I might say I made the right decision to study art. Okay, well, it worked out. It feels good. I feel like it was a good decision. But in reality, if I had chosen something else, that might have been a good decision too. So I would really encourage people to spend less time trying to make that perfect decision that has no mistakes, that has no risk, that has no chance of failure, and be a little more excited that you're going to make a decision and then you're going to make it the right decision. You're going to invest yourself in making it work. And failure and mistakes are inevitable. And spending all your time trying to avoid it, that is a huge mistake, in my opinion, to spend too much time trying to avoid a mistake or a failure, because those are our teachers. So I don't want to be afraid of making a mistake or having a failure. I want to make the best decision I can, and then I want to make that decision the best.
How can reading your book help me in making decisions and finding these little moments in every day to give myself permission?
Well, there's, I think 57 chapters in the book, something like that, and each one is, a different mindset. Each one is a little it's like a little lens to look at the world through. And I don't think anyone is gonna read every chapter. I don't think every chapter is gonna resonate with people. They're all very different. They're short, but they invite you to, sort of just look through a new lens at the world. And it might give you a freedom here and there and bring you a little more joy. So it's all tips and techniques that I've learned that people have taught me or techniques that I've used. And and so I'm hoping that if there's one or two in there, Luca, like if you read the book and there's one or two of them in there, you're like, I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna try that. I That's what I hope happens is that people find a little window they can climb through to make life a little easier and more joyful.
If you give yourself like so much permission, you start
Mhm.
giving yourself permission,
Mhm.
how do you avoid that it doesn't become an excuse to not commit or to be distracted?
Um, I think it's important to, when you are giving yourself permission to put the time in to really question what it's about, right? So if I'm gonna give myself permission to skip my workout today, like I'm just gonna I've decided I don't wanna do it, not up for it, to really ask myself, am I making that choice because it really gives me joy to do something else? Or am I just trying to avoid something I know I should do, that I really
Mm,
want to do to take care of myself? And everyone has to make these decisions for themselves. I think, Luca, we all know someone who is totally okay giving themselves permission to do whatever, and they might be seen as irresponsible, and they're breaking things, and they're not able to maintain relationships, and they're not living in a healthy way. That's not the life that I think I'm trying to guide people toward. I'm trying to guide people toward making choices and permissions that align with their values. I'll give you an example. Um, our Lauren, we both know Lauren through Brand Builders Group, Lauren
yeah.
Hassan. The other day, she and I were talking, and she said, Maggie, I just have to tell you, I used permission recently. I had booked a trip to go to a conference, and I spent a lot of money to go to this conference. It was travel, it was a hotel. I invested in the fee to go. It was a big, big investment. And I got there and I was tired from the travel, and I'm sitting in the conference and I find myself exhausted and unhappy. And I decided I can give myself permission to go take a nap. And then I can come back to the conference and I'll feel better. And she did it.
Mm,
And I think that that is a very good example because I think we've all been in that moment. I've spent money to be here, or I've invested in this thing, or I've decided I'm doing this thing and I've spent my money or I've made my time to be here. And then suddenly I realize I'm not. I need something else. I can't be here. I don't want to be here. I need a moment. I need to give myself permission to do something else. And we don't want to give ourselves that permission because we feel like, oh, we're wasting. But
mm,
I look at it as a healthy self-care. Lauren going to take that nap gave her the ability to be more present and make the most of that investment. And so those are the kinds of permissions I love to see, as opposed to permission to not show up for obligations or permission to blow people off. That's not what I'm talking about.
no,
That
true.
that can be indulgent. So you have to know when you are truly aligning with who you are and your values versus just blowing things off.
Yeah. I also gave myself permission. Like this morning, I booked it. It's a stand-up comedy for beginners training. So yeah, I figure it's something. I've been acting like all my life, but I never really done stand-up.
That is so good, Luca. That is a great example because comedy is scary. Comedy is scary. It's hard. And I think what you've done is given yourself permission to go try something. And maybe fail and maybe, and bring it back to your speaking or just to go have fun with it. I just absolutely love that.
I thought that signing up for this class would get me out of my comfort zone. It would put me in front of other people, knowing other people and making connections. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be a stand-up comedian, but
Yeah,
it is going to expand you in some way. And I think,
absolutely.
that is also something that is like really cool about trying new stuff and not being afraid to fail
Mhm.
or suck.
There's inherent value in trying something new. It doesn't matter if you're good at it. There is inherent joy and value in being willing to try something new and fumble around and be bad at it and be okay with that. And I think that that is what we miss sometimes as adults is we get stuck with, well, I should only do what I'm good at. I should do this
Mm.
because I'm competent at it. I should do it because it makes sense. No, no, none of that's true. You can do things purely for the joy of doing it and trying and being terrible at it. I love it. It's a great example of exactly what people should be doing with their time is what lights them up. So well done, sir. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we wrap this up, like I would love for you to speak to the person who's listening and who is questioning themselves, holding themselves back, not giving themselves permission, or maybe even thinking it's too late to give yourself permission to do something. Like, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that they can trust themselves, that sometimes we have the invisible chains on ourselves of what people are expecting, and we don't want to see the disappointment on other people's faces, or we don't want to hear um, their questions about, well, why are you doing this? This sounds crazy to me. And when we really tune in to who we are and what we want, and you realize that you get one opportunity on earth, you get
Mm.
one opportunity to be here and live fully in the moment, then we can start to write down those beliefs that are holding us back, right? So if you have a wish, I want to relocate. I want to move to a new town. And then you write down all the beliefs underneath that hold you back from making that big decision or even a small decision. You can start to see the pattern in your belief and where those are really anchored. Are they anchored in what other people are going to think or say? Or are they really anchored in your own beliefs and your own values of who you are? So, my advice to them is to really think about that thing they want and then write down all the beliefs that hold them back and start to question them one by one. Is this really true?
What is one way you start questioning those beliefs? Like very practically.
Um, there is there is free resources for anyone who's interested. Um, so I'm going to point them to, you can visit my website,
Mm-hmm.
maggieharlow.com, and there are some resources there. But you can also visit my personal guru, I'll call her, Byron Katie. She has a website called thework.com, and all of her resources are free, and you can download them. And she will teach you how to question what you believe. And I have a couple tools as well, but they're not as pointed as hers. Her
Okay.
technique in specifically around giving yourself the freedom to question what you believe is really powerful. And so I recommend thework.com, but feel free to message me at maggieharlow.com and I will share with you my tools as well. You've been so generous to me, Luca. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And if I can help one person open that door of permission to give themselves something that thrills them or gives them joy, that's really what I want to do.
Thanks so much, Maggie. And to you listening, maybe you're at home, at work, in your car, taking a walk outside. I hope this conversation sparked something for you because it's time to stop waiting for permission and start creating the life you know you want. You'll find links to Maggie Harlow, her book Everyday Extraordinary, and everything we talked about in the show notes. And if this conversation made you think of someone you care about, share it with them. It's one thing to have to figure these things out on your own, but it's way easier and for sure a whole lot more fun if we're doing it together. I'm Luca, and I can't wait to see you in our next conversation.